What up? What up? Man, first off, let me say thanks to everybody who responded to my last video. I really appreciate the feedback, the response, and everything. I love you, good, man. Bleed for you, bleed for you. In any case, thought I'd come back with a couple thoughts on the last Strike Force card. I didn't see the whole thing. In fact, right as I tuned in right as Jagard Masasi was about to just lay an ass whooping on Sokoju. I'm sorry I missed the whole thing. I will go back and watch it, but I'm not very good at watching stuff where I already know what happened. It's like I have to watch it live to really give my response to it, or else it's just poison. That's all I'd say. But I watched this right as he got on top of Sokoju and just started putting the ground and pound to him. And Sokoju kind of reminds me of Quentin Jackson when he was sitting in the corner and Shogun was just teeing off on him with soccer kicks and just kicked the shit out of him. Then just turned out of the ring and they finally stopped it. But and it kind of reminded me what Boss Rutan was saying. It's like, this is what I can't believe. It's like when you keep losing the same way every time, you have to do something to reverse the situation. And that's the kind of frustration I have with Sokoju. It's like, I understand, it's like Jagard's a much better fighter than him. I mean, that's a bad motherfucker, just to put it plainly. Dude's a killer. I'm very impressed with the fights I've seen him do, and I'm very excited to see him fight again. I think he's a very bright spot for the Strike Force, and that's a guy I would keep my eye out to watch. However, Sokoju, I think he came into the UFC as a house fire. He's hot off those two knockouts of Rogerio and Ricardo Arona, but I think he keeps losing the same way. He wears himself out and around, then just gets, he ends up on the ground on his back, hacking and wheezing until someone finally stops it, or until someone submits him or whatever. And it's like, how can you keep doing the same thing over and over again? If you keep gassing in 5 minutes, maybe you need to work on your cardio. Maybe you need to work on your ground so you just don't get, put in the same positions and lose the same way all the time. But anyway, that ain't about him. I mean, whatever. Jagard Musasi, like I said, the dude's a straight killer. One of the most exciting fighters. I'm just, as young as he is, I'm very impressed by his poise. The dude doesn't hesitate. He does what he needs to do at the right time. It's like when he got in that clinch with Babalu or something, he didn't like try to work for the takedown. He just, immediately his reflexes just pulled the trigger right then and there. Same thing with the Chikare fight. It's like he doesn't panic. He just does what he has to do at that particular time, and that's why he's just been so dominant lately. Moving right along, I saw most of the middleweight fight with who is it? Jake Shields versus Jason Mayhem Miller. The last time I saw Jake Shields, I think I have a video down there somewhere. It was on the Pro Elite card against Simtex. And one thing I said was I wasn't very impressed with his performance, GSP style, but that hasn't changed. I'm not impressed with him. I think he's a pretty good fighter, but on no means, he's not an elite fighter, not really top champion or nothing like that. I mean, he is the Strike Force champion, but, like I said, I think he'd be a good champion for Strike Force. I don't see him going nowhere. If he was in the UFC, could he challenge GSP or Anderson Silva? No, get destroyed. And it was just way too one-dimensional, and the fight was, I think, it was good at first. It's like there was some very good grappling, some very good takedowns and everything, but it's the same thing every time. Takes him down. Jason Miller backs up on the cage. Then Jake Shields, holds on to his legs. He may pass his guard, get swept, whatever. The most exciting part of the fight came when he was almost choked out, but since then it was just more the same, more this, more that. Like I said, he's a really good fighter. I think he's a deserving champion, but however, the one things I like about MMA, especially when I watch, I want to see something significant. I want to see the best. I want to see guys like Musasi, like Fedor, and or even Verdum or or Silva. I heard a lot of good things about, Big Silva, but I wasn't able to see that fight. But I'll probably catch a little bit more of it later. But like I said, I want to see significant events. And Jake Shields, nothing really significant about dude. In any case, moving right along to the main event. That's what I really came to see, and that is Fedor Emelianenko versus Brett Rogers. Now, a lot of people might, a lot of detractors might hate on Fedor, saying he's not fighting top competition. I think he fought top competition last Saturday. Brett Rogers, I didn't think a whole lot of him coming into this fight. I was expecting to see a quick Zulu, quick Zulu whoop ass. But I think he came in there, very smart game plan. He worked very hard. He trained very hard. And, he had a pretty good game plan. However, I think the problem was just too many things have to go right for Brett Rogers for him to beat a guy like Fedor. Fedor Emelianenko, he's always mentioned in the same breath as Silva. These two are always going back and forth. Fedor wins the fight, he's the number one pound-for-pound fighter. Anderson Silva wins the fight, he's number one, and so on and so forth. Fedor really impresses me. Now, what impresses me, of course, about the power, about the grappling, about the punching, and this, that, the other. Now, as I said with Anderson Silva, the thing that really impresses me with both of these guys is the intelligence and the ability to quickly make adjustments. It's like people point to the Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson fight. Yeah, Dan Henderson won that first round, but what really made that fight was Anderson Silva, between rounds, he switched up his game plan, switched up his strikes, and it's like Dan Henderson tried to do the same thing. Anderson Silva stuffed him, closed that door, and eventually finished the fight in another 5 minutes. Same thing with Fedor Emelianenko. He got a good feeling about Brett Rogers in the first round. I think he took a good shot right at the start of the fight. First punch Brett Rogers threw, I think it broke his nose or whatever. He even got Fedor down and started, dropping some bombs on him. Like Jake Shields or something, when he was on top, he was dropping pellets. Brett Rogers, the fool, was dropping bombs on Fedor. And Fedor, another thing, the composure. Because I thought it was, because, if that was probably anybody else, no disrespect. I mean, some big 265-pound monster sitting up there just dropping hammers on you. Yeah, that's a finish. The fight is over once a guy just starts dropping leather like that. However, Fedor just ate a couple shots, just stayed out of harm's way. Just kind of reminded me of when he was in the Randallplex or something. Dude's facial expression, even when he was like upside down, flying towards the ground, just impassive, and almost worked the armbar. And I got to give credit to Rogers. He avoided, eating the big punch at the beginning of the fight. Didn't avoid it later, and he avoided, all the cliche, Fedor traps of Fedor. So I thought, okay, Fedor by armbar. Nope, he's out of it. He did a good job not making the mistakes of Fedor's previous opponents. However, he did make one big mistake. He got a little tired, and after the clinch or something, after he clinched him with a little bit, he let go. Started fixing his trunks or something, and walked into Fedor with his hands around his waist. And the rest, they say, is history. Really good fight. Brett was very upset with himself, very upset, at the fight, but I think he did a good job. I was really impressed with him. I was very impressed with Fedor. That's one of the things I would like to see him in the UFC for, because I like to see him, fight on the schedule. Fight against guys who aren't going to make the same mistakes, not so much that Brett Rogers. I want to see him fight more guys like Brett Rogers in the UFC or more. I want to see him fight more often against guys, because when you're fighting as often, like a champion or something, nothing against Fedor, but when you're fighting like all the time or something, you're going to go against guys who are going to it's going to constantly get tougher because people are constantly make adjustments. I want to see Fedor make an adjustment. That's what, really impressed me with Spider. Every fight you saw for a while, it showed just how good he is, because you're just really getting an idea, because he's constantly changing, constantly evolving. And, Fedor, that's a fight, so I really enjoy him. I would like to see him fight more often. But anyway, that's enough rambling by me. I enjoyed the card, and I'll catch y'all later. Probably hit you up with some more stuff. And I really need to get the UFC 5 thing going, but oh well. See you later.